And we're going live.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to give people a few moments to join. And we will get started. Okay, I can see people are joining all the time. I'm just going to give them a bit. Okay, just things. Right. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm David Charlesworth. I'm a communications manager here at GCP, and I look after the northern projects which we're talking about tonight. We've got quite a wide range of topics that we're covering tonight, including the Waterbeach to Cambridge project, the St Ives and Waterbeach Greenway, Histon Road, and Milton Road projects. I'm joined by my colleagues who are the relevant project managers for these projects, and we'll be able to give you an update. The way we're going to organise it is that we will do a short presentation, an update on each project. Will then be an opportunity for a question and answer before we move on to the next session. The project, the webinar tonight is being recorded, and that will be made available on our YouTube channel, and we will also put the presentations on our website as well. There are a couple of ways that you can ask questions. You can either put your hand up, and we will then unmute you, and you can answer that way, or you can put something in the chat function. We'll try and get through everything. I will if we get a number of questions that are very similar, then we can then put them together into ask one question. But we're very keen for you to verbalise your questions and to ask them, because then they stay on the recording, and that's how we will take them forward. Things. If at the end of it, we will put the email address up. So if you have a question or something that occurs to you once the meeting is finished, then please do email us in, and we'll answer the questions that way. So as you can see, this is a Zoom webinar format. I just remind everybody that normal rules of behaviour apply, and that any inappropriate conduct or disruptive behaviour may result in you being excluded from the things. We're all joining from home. There might be a few technical glitches. I think we've all been doing this for 2 years now, so we understand all that, but I'm sure we can all get through it. I think that is everything. Thomas, would you manage to start the presentation, please, and we'll then move on to the first of the presentations. I would just say we're covering quite a lot of topics tonight. I think we've got nearly 45 slides. I know there's been a number of meetings on some of these topics before. I'm very keen that we ask as many questions as possible, but don't feel if you've asked a question it's been answered in another meeting that you need to then come back and ask the same one here. The public record exists in terms of previous recordings of where we are. But particularly if you're new to this, or you've come to one of our projects before, we're very keen to hear from new people and spread the information around about the projects that we're working on. Next slide, please, Tom. So this is tonight's agenda. As I say, we're going to start with Waterbeach first, and that will be project manager Paul van der Balk will do a presentation. Then we'll move on to the St Ives and Waterbeach Greenways, and Chris Hart, the project manager, will talk to that. We'll then just do a short update on the completed project of Histon Road, where Paul will speak again, and then we'll just do a summary on an update on Milton Road as well, when Thomas Porter, the project manager that's coming into that project to manage the delivery phase of that, will do the presentation there. That's how we plan to, and again, we'll take questions after each presentation rather than stacking them up to a big pile at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, Paul, I have just reminded everybody that A, that we are recording this, and B, that there's a live transcript for those people that want to follow it that way. It is live as well. But Paul, over to you, please.
Okay, thanks, David. Tom, go on. So just to introduce, I'm Paul van der Balk, project manager with the GCP. and currently managing the Waterbeach to Cambridge public transport and active travel project. So the aim of the project is to deliver a new high quality and segregated public transport route between the new town at Waterbeach, which is being built on the old airfield, and Cambridge, so linking up with the current guided busway. We're also looking at facilitating new infrastructure for active travel if it's required, or linking with routes that are already in development. So there's a number of routes, and we'll cover that later. And just say that the strategic outline business case, which was completed in 2021, established that there is a strong case for this new route for public transport, and recommended to take forward 2 route options for further analysis, which will be shown in later slides. So next, Tom. So this slide here sets out the 2 routes that the 2 route areas that we're currently looking at, and which we're taking forward from the last stage. So we've got the purple route, which is a revised, now our central route, which comes out of the new town, crosses the A10, passes south to the west, to the east of the main Land Beach village, to the east of the other part of Land Beach, so through Land Beach, and then we've got an option where we either pass close to Milton Park and Ride, or we can pass further to the west of that before linking with the guided busway to the south of the route. The western route likewise passes to the west of Land Beach and follows adjacent to kind of the Mere Way. How close to the Mere Way is something that we're looking at. And then obviously also joins with the guided busway just to the north of the current underpass under the A14. Next slide, Tom. So in terms of the work that's been ongoing in the past few months, so the consultants Atkins have been looking at kind of what we do at the Waterbeach end. So this slide is a very basic schematic setting out some of the areas that we obviously want to pass the route close to. So the principal centre of the new town, there's the relocated railway station that we're planning for, and Urban and Civic, who are the first developers on this site, have got a temporary travel hub within their site that we're looking at. And then what's not shown on this is where the route, the northern point where it joins the A10, there's obviously Cambridge Research Park, and we're starting to engage with the Research Park in terms of what their needs are. In terms of the route, we are looking at providing a fully segregated route, and we're working with the developer in this area in the new town to try to achieve that where it's possible. And most of the route through the new town, it should be possible to create a fully segregated route. There's a couple of areas, so the link between the travel hub and the research park has already been built. So there's a possibility that we would run the route on road on that section, but saying that, we're still looking at if there is any possibility of segregating. Next slide, Tom. So I think I've covered this slide, so let's go to the next one. So in terms of how the busway might access the new town, so we're looking at how we cross the A10. And the next diagrams are extremely indicative. They are schematics, ideas, they're not set in stone. And at the moment, we're actually having discussions with Urban and Civic in terms of what their plans are for a southern access into the town. So one idea is that you place a roundabout somewhere in this area. In fact, the Urban and Civic Master Plan has that roundabout further south, nearer to their bridge, which is shown kind of to the south of this drawing. The route that goes off to the west is obviously our bus route, and the main road north-south is the A10. So this shows one possible option that we could utilise to cross the A10. And the next slide shows another option, which is a bridge over the A10. And again, very indicative. This slide also shows how we would possibly link the bus route to the Mireway active travel route that's being delivered by the developer. So the small section here, again, very indicative, but it just shows some of the work that we're currently looking at the moment. Next slide, Tom. In terms of park and ride, we're also looking at park and ride requirements in the A10, on the A10 corridor. So obviously we currently have a park and ride at Milton. That remains an option going forward. Another option is that we close the Milton park and ride, a new park and ride near a water beach. Further option, which is kind of the option that we think is the more pragmatic option at the moment, is to keep Milton park and ride and have a new, perhaps smaller park and ride further up the A10 at Water Beach. And the evidence that has fed our, led to these conclusions include various model run results. And we're also looking at the current and future roles of Milton in terms of what it can provide in the future, whether there's any possibilities to kind of enhance the provision at Milton Park and Ride, or add facilities such as parking for buses or charging facilities, perhaps. So there are some of the considerations and in terms of park and ride, we are at the stage where we're kind of getting to the point of settling on a preferred option of keeping both park and rides, and the consultants are now starting to look at kind of site options for a possible park and ride near Water Beach, near town. And the concept of park and ride would all be consulted on when we go out to consultation later this year. Next slide, Tom. So I think I've covered this, so go to the next one. In terms of active travel, I mentioned that we are looking at whether we incorporate active travel alongside our public transport route, or whether we link and make better use of the existing routes that are being planned for this area. So the question is, does our scheme need to provide additional active travel infrastructure? This is the question that the consultants are currently exploring. So if we go to the next slide. So on the slide, we've got the two public transport options that I mentioned earlier. Can I actually use a pointer? I don't know. We have the blue, which is the Water Beach Greenway that's being proposed. So that comes up from Cambridge, obviously splits into as we get nearer Water Beach. Urban and Civic are also providing some enhancements on the A10 and down through Milton. So there's a slight widening of the foot-stroke cycle path, I think, to create a shared use path alongside the A10, which, although it isn't perfect, provides another slightly enhanced to what is there now route for pedestrians and cycles. And then finally, Urban and Civic are also in the final stages of design and looking to start building the Mireway route, which is the kind of the dark purple route. It comes west out of the new town, it snakes through Land Beach and then runs along Mireway all the way down to the A14. It goes under the underpass near the regional college. So we have 3 active travel routes that are in various stages of development. And the question will be, with regard to the public transport route, do we need another active travel route, or do we perhaps link into the existing that are being planned? Next slide. Go to the next one, please, Tom. So in terms of stop locations, again, this is very high level and also very indicative, but it's just to give a demonstration of kind of what we're looking at the moment, which kind of gives a flavour of what we might be consulting on later this year. So we've discussed with various stakeholders, including bus stagecoach and park and ride manager at the county council, possible stop locations along the various options and within the town itself. And then if we go to the next slide, another thing that we are discussing is the infrastructure at these stops. So in some cases we may have a simple bus stop, but if we go to the next slide, it shows a stop that is being proposed on the C-sets, which is the Linton to the south of Cambridge public transport route. So here you've got a drop-off point, a few disabled parking spaces, obviously your bike storage, and so slightly larger than just a typical bus stop. If we go to the next slide. So that kind of shows what all these kind of things that we're currently looking at. We're obviously at the stage now where we are, it's highlighted in red here. So we're preparing the outline business case, including some of the engineering and environmental assessment and transport modelling. This is leading to a consultation later this year on a preferred option for the route. So we're hoping to consult on a single line on the map, which will be our preferred option for the route, and we'll also be consulting on various options for park and ride. And following the consultation, we look to complete the outline business case by the spring of 2023, so we can take it back to the executive board. Next slide. I think that's the end of my presentation. So questions.
Thanks very much, Paul. So Paul, Councillor Bear Park, I've seen you put your hand up, so I'm going to ask to unmute.
Yeah, thank you, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Paul.
Hello, Paul. I think I probably asked this question before, but how are these routes going to serve the existing villages of Waterbeach and Milton? I couldn't see any stops there at all for the existing villages. Most of the stops seem to be in the middle of nowhere. Is the intention that people are either going to have to walk a long way or get on their bike in order to get to the stops, either in the new town or those that are along the route?
You're on mute, Paul.
Can we go back to that slide, please, Tom? Sorry, David. No, forward to. You went too far.
Yeah,
there we go. So the stops, I mean, as I said, this is indicative and it's for discussion at the moment. So if you look along that central route, the stops along the route kind of tie in with Land Beach Village. And then the blue stop to the south ties with Milton Park and Ride. And then the two black stops are kind of existing stops on the existing guided busway. I think through our workshop discussion, we also discussed having a stop towards Orchard Park. Within the new town itself, we've got a stop at the station, the proposed relocated station, sorry, the town centre, and then the travel hub, and then the research park. So in terms of how this route would serve Waterbeach Village itself and Milton, obviously the segregated route runs outside of the villages. Another thing that we are looking at is how we, so wherever we have a junction with a road, we need to look carefully in terms of how we allow the guided buses to access the busway to ensure that it's possible to to have a service that, for example, you could have a service that ran from the town centre in the new town down through Waterbeach and then join the busway near Land Beach, for example. That can only, for example, that's an example of if we took the central route as the preferred option, you could feasibly run a service that did that, which would therefore serve the village of Waterbeach. And that's just an example of how we are looking to kind of accommodate the villages.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be useful if you could kind of show that on these maps as possibilities, because it's no longer a Cambridge autonomous metro. It's likely to be buses, so the buses don't have to run only on segregated routes. So I think it would be helpful for villagers in both Waterbeach and Milton to be able to see how those buses might be routed through the villages.
Yeah, of course, and no, I totally agree with that, actually.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so Edward Taylor, you've got your hand up. I'm just going to
Hello.
Oh. Hi, Edward. I can't hear you.
Hello.
Yes, can hear you now, Edward.
Okay, thanks. Milton Cycling Campaign. I'm kind of on the same tack as Paul Bear Park there. I'd strongly urge you to consider putting routes through Waterbeach and Milton, and not to do this corridor, either of them really. I just can't see a justification for it when you've got a need to send buses down this corridor. There are roads already either through Land Beach or through Waterbeach and Milton. So please do that and don't chew up the farmland. And let's see what we can do as far as active travel, other things that we can do to send those other, active travel in terms of walking and cycling on those routes as well, alongside that. It seems crazy to build new infrastructure when there are existing roads which can already accommodate buses.
So the issue is that the existing roads are congested and public transport struggles to serve the villages,
okay.
And in fact further north.
Okay, well, there's a problem to be dealt with. There's a problem to be dealt with
using the existing infrastructure.
Yeah. So this is a way of avoiding dealing with the problem of congestion and switching to active travel by spending millions and millions of pounds chewing up greenbelt and farmland. I cannot consent to that.
Okay, that's
fine.
I mean, everyone has a view, so yeah. It's fine to express the view.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Edward. Moving on to the next person, Susan J. I'm just going to unmute you.
Hello, Susan.
Hi, we can hear you.
Jordan. I'm afraid I'm on a similar kick. The park and ride at near the new station up at the top. It's such a long way from the rail station that the early morning commuters are very unlikely to want to use it if it's raining. You can go down to the Cambridge North and be undercover almost all the way. Very short, much shorter distance from Park and Ride to Cambridge North. I would like to use any space we can find for a break bulk session, so that we can have smaller vehicles entering the city centre and even cargo bikes. At the moment, the heavy goods vehicles are destroying the road surfaces, and when they have to turn in little spaces, a break bulk is desperately needed, but it needs to be a proper one with freezers and things like that available.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to just respond to that?
No, comments taken on board though.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks very much. So moving on, the next one is Sue Rogers. I'm just clicked on you, Sue. So.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, I'm on the local access forum as the cycling rep. I'm also the secretary of Swavesey District Bridleways Association, so I come to this sort of all-round non-motorised user perspective. Active travel does include all forms of non-motorised users, so it includes horse riders as well as walkers and cyclists. My question I put in the chat was Trumpington Park and Rise is currently having an extension, which is going to include an area for horse box parking. So I've just put in there, it'd be excellent if whatever's built at Waterbeach, wherever it is, and I support the other two speakers that, you know, if you want people to use it, it needs to be near the railway station if possible. But can it have horse box and motor caravan parking spaces? Because they just make a big difference. It opens up the area to exploration for horse riders that can then go to the pub for a drink and spend money. And again, holiday makers, lots of my friends have got motor caravans, and you know, they want to park them on the outside. You can't get into a multi-storey car park, a motor caravan, and then go into town for the day. So two good ways of sort of helping the local economy. Thank you.
So yeah, so the answer to that is that we will be looking at what is being provided at the new park and rides that are being built elsewhere around Cambridge, and we will be looking to follow a similar model in terms of what we provide.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sue. So just moving on, Adam, I see you've got your hand up, Adam Garston. So I'm just
I should caveat that with if there is a case to build a new park and ride at Waterbeach, of course, because we haven't established that case fully yet.
Okay. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Hi,
Can you hear me? Good, good. I was just curious, if you add up all of the various transport schemes that you're proposing, how many people sort of per hour will that actually move from Waterbeach Newtown into Cambridge?
So you've asked me a technical question now that I don't have an immediate answer for, but that information will be set out in the strategic outline business case, which is available on our website. Alternatively, I can provide the answer after the meeting, David.
Okay, that's fine. Adam, if you wanted to just email us with your question as well, we have to get you an answer to that as well.
Lovely, thank you.
That's fine. I don't see any more people with their hands up. There's a couple of questions here. One person was asking what a break bulk is, Paul, from the previous question. I think that's when you have a sort of transfer station where you transfer from large lorries to smaller vehicles to get into an urban centre. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And just a question here from Linda Worth. Has consideration been given to using the new busway for active travel routes and leaving Mere Way as a green corridor?
So we're currently fairly open-minded in terms of, the question that we have at the moment is whether there is a need for full active travel route alongside the public transport route or not. But those kind of considerations are being given.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't see any more questions, hands up, or in the thing. So we're going to move on to the next topic, and we've done half an hour of the meeting, so that's quite timely. So we're now going to hand over to, thanks very much, Paul, for that presentation. We're going to hand over to Chris, who is the project manager for the St Ives and Waterbeach Greenways, and he's going to just talk you through where we are on these projects. Again, if you want to ask a question, please put your hand up or put something in the chat. So.
No, thank you, David. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Brilliant. Hi everyone. Yeah, good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. So yeah, I'm Chris Hart. I'm one of the project managers for the Greenways program in Cambridgeshire. One of two project managers. I think it's largely because we've got so many routes we're looking at. We've got 12 routes in total, and so I'm kind of looking after kind of half of them, as it were. Next slide, please. Great. Thank you. So the map on the right hand side will probably be familiar to some of you. So this is the kind of the aspirational Greenways network. So we've got 12 Greenways routes in total. And the aim is really just to provide, well, partly it's about kind of supporting the growth of Cambridgeshire in a sustainable way. And the aim is to provide kind of safe, connected, active travel routes for walker, cyclists, and equestrian users as well. And yeah, that's basically to support that kind of growth in active travel. So yeah, sort of turning the clock back a little bit. So the executive board approved all the Greenways projects in December 2020, and probably since then there's been a period of time to get the contract set up, and we've got transport consultants appointed during the summer 2021 to start basically developing the kind of the more technical concept design stages of the work, because probably some of you have seen the sort of public consultation concepts that were presented in public consultation. We've kind of asked them to now look at the sort of the feasibility of that, so they're kind of focused on that. They're all at slightly different stages at the moment, but yeah, so yeah, some of them are sort of ahead of others, and the kind of the routes that are kind of relevant to kind of this committee are the St Ives Greenway, which as you can see from the plan kind of runs from Cambridge North to St Ives through Fen Drayton, and then Waterbeach as well, which, as Paul was talking about, sort of connects Cambridge North with Waterbeach, and obviously the new development there. And I'll touch on a little bit more detail about that a bit later on. So yeah, just in terms of the consultants that are working on these, so we've appointed Atkins and WSP. So Atkins are kind of looking at the kind of the northern and southern tranches, and WSP are looking after the eastern and western tranches. So yes, next slide, please. So yeah, this is just to really outline some of the sort of the program level stuff we're looking at from a Greenways perspective. First on the list is the development of a wayfinding strategy, and basically a draft of that will be ready by sort of the end of March, and then we're planning to kind of engage kind of key stakeholders and the parishes and county thereafter. But the purpose of the wayfinding is really just to provide sort of directional signage to help people understand that they're on a greenway, how to get to another greenway, how to connect between different locations, estimated walking times and cycle times are kind of part of that. And there's some examples of wayfinding sort of throughout the just some examples there on the right hand side. So yeah, so that's really important, I think, because we're conscious we've got 12 different greenways in development, and we want them to kind of we want people to understand that they're kind of on a greenway route, and they're not sort of joining various different they don't all look and feel different to one another. So that's one kind of tranche of work that and Atkins are kind of leading that piece of work for us. As you can understand, we've got, I think, something like 150 kilometres of greenways route across Cambridgeshire that we're looking at. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work looking at kind of land referencing at the moment. Not all of what we're going to be delivering will be on public highway or council-owned land. So we need to kind of understand kind of land ownership, who owns what land, because obviously we can then start the process to engage those landowners on different aspects of the routes. The third item on the list is the program outline business case, and that really just sort of sets the scene in terms of like the strategic case and objectives for the development of the greenways. So that piece of work is being led by WSP, and that piece of work will be presented to the executive board in October 2022, so just a bit later on this year. And that will effectively provide the framework for kind of development of OBCs for each individual route, if that makes sense. So that's a bit on business case. We have started to engage with our contractor because we want to be sort of proactive in terms of understanding kind of issues early on. We're going through potentially a lot of private land here. So we're working closely with our contractor Milestone to sort of understand kind of construction issues early on, and we can engage them. And the key thing there is trying identifying some of the key sort of early wins, if you like, in terms of which we want to bring forward some sections of route, because we appreciate that not all of it will be able to be delivered as quickly as other parts of the routes. And yes, so yeah, the fourth bullet there is about the technical concept designs, which I've mentioned already. So we've got Atkins and WSP kind of leading those designs across all of the routes. And then we'll follow a period of kind of engagement with key stakeholders, the NMU groups, and public consultation thereafter, which I've got a slide on that a bit later on. Next slide, please. So yeah, so in terms of kind of where we're at with the kind of the northern schemes, I mean the St Ives route, as probably most of you know, is a bulk of the route is substantially already in place. It sort of parallels the existing Cambridgeshire Guideway, and along the former railway line. There's two kind of packages of work that we're kind of looking at to develop. One, we appreciate there's a number of sections of the existing route sort of sits below the existing guideway level, so there's certain areas that are susceptible to flooding on a fairly regular basis. And obviously that makes it impassable and inconvenient if you're walking, cycling, or horse riding. So it's inconvenient. You get to a point and you can't pass it, and there are some unsafe behaviours that have been sort of captured. So part of the work we're looking at is looking at kind of how we address those sections so that we can minimise that sort of disruption, make the sort of the end-to-end route between St Ives and Cambridge continuous and direct. And the other kind of element is we're looking at sort of a number of kind of offshoots or sort of connections off the main kind of guideway. So Oakingham to Cottenham link, a link to Fendrayton as well, which sort of near the RSPB reserve, and sort of a spur off over. And and as mentioned on the slide there's construction has started on the Rampton section, and there's a resurfacing trial on Reynolds Drove, which is, I think I know it's been delayed because they had to introduce it when the temperatures were correct. So I think that's going in, and that will be a surfacing material that I think we're going to get all the NMU sort of users to try and test out and see if that's kind of an acceptable type of surfacing to use where we need to where we have kind of proposed kind of shared use provision. And then the Waterbeach link, which is the other northern one. So this is largely kind of a new route, sort of connecting Cambridge and Waterbeach, and that part of that is really to help accommodate the sustainable growth of Waterbeach itself. And also we want to capitalise on all the other kind of proposed development. So the Sports Lake Trust have got plans to develop sort of a major sporting facility just to the west of the Greenways route. Obviously that's proposed, and there's other developments as well that we want to kind of capitalise on to ensure kind of support the sustainable growth. So where we're at the moment, so the consultants have sort of in the kind of the initial kind of technical concept design stage. So we've been doing site visits. So I was actually on site yesterday, walking along St Ives, looking at the sort of the flooding or potential flooding points. There'll be environmental constraints mapping, technical assessments of the routes, topographical surveys, utility searches, as well as kind of engagement with sort of key stakeholders. Yeah, we were out yesterday with EA, for example. So yeah, so I'd say we're fairly early on in the process of developing the Greenways schemes, but kind of the next stage will involve kind of meeting and engagement events with key stakeholders, community groups, residents and parish councils to sort of allow them to have early sight of the design so that we can then kind of take on board those comments and before we sort of progress with sort of the next stage of the design. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is sort of our timetable for sort of the public sort of engagement on the design. So I suppose just to say, in terms of the Waterbeach and St Ives, we're looking at autumn, winter this year when we'll start to do that, and we can start talking to people about those designs. Next slide, please. So yeah, these are kind of the next steps. So engagement events will take place as what I mentioned previously. The program outline business case and, as I said earlier, program delivery timetable will all be completed and submitted to the exec board in October. And I suppose that the third bullet there is probably what everyone's probably interested in, is when we can actually start building some of the sections. And I suppose with a fair wind, and you know, where we don't necessarily need land take or planning permission, we might be able to deliver certain quick wins early on, and you know, slightly longer process for kind of those private land sections. But yeah, at the moment, yeah, the completion of the Greenways is programmed in for 2025.
Okay,
that was
thanks,
my
Chris.
last slide.
Yes, it was excellent. Thanks, Chris. So I've got some questions now. So Councillor Paul Bearpark, I can see you've got your hand up, so let's take you first.
Yeah, thank you very much. A few questions, but just in terms of when the Greenway was originally, you showed on your slides the Greenways having been approved by the GCP Executive Board in December 2020. I don't think that's correct. I think it was the 19th of February 2020, almost a year earlier. I don't know whether you can comment on that at the moment.
Yeah, David, correct me if I'm wrong. That might have been when the last route was approved by.
Yeah, they were taken in batches, Paul, of which I think they went to a number of our executive committees because there's so many of them. They were taken in batches, and the last batch was taken in December.
So I'm fairly sure the Waterbeach one was approved by the Executive Board on the 19th of February 2020.
Okay. That's
I suppose what I'd like to understand is what progress has been made between that date and consultants being appointed in summer of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry,
go on, Chris.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question. I think for various reasons, I think the getting a framework or a contract set up with the consultants has maybe taken longer than expected. So it meant that the consultants were appointed in summer 2021. I don't think I can really comment on what happened in that period of in between time, because I wasn't involved in the project, but others on the call might fill that gap in.
Yeah, I think I'm afraid, Paul, I wasn't working on the Greenways then either, so I'm not really cited on what work was done, because they were still sitting with the county cycling team at that point. They were handed over to us at GCP when we put the framework in position, and that the consultant, which will allow us, when the consultants bring this forward, this period of this work stream that Chris has outlined today. But if you want to drop me an email, I'm sure we'll be able to try and find out a bit more of an answer to you.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to where we are now then. So you say we're at outline business case. I mean, normally outline business case is about identifying the preferred route. Now, as far as I'm aware, all of the Greenways have already got a preferred route. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's certainly a preferred alignments which were tabled at the consultation. I think the outline the program outline case is there to kind of help sort of further I suppose justify the schemes, make sure they're as robust as possible. Yes, I think that's probably all I can say on that.
Okay. All right, just one further question is about the Waterbeach Greenway itself, is the phase 1 and phase 2. So I think you're probably aware that phase 1 was approved on the 19th February 2020. And I'm just trying to understand what the situation is with phase 2, because it's got these two separate sections. There's a northern section and there's a southern section, which would involve an underpass under the A14.
Yep.
So obviously there's a big difference between those two. I mean, are you working on the outline business case for both phase 1 and phase 2, or just phase 1?
It's as far as I understand, it's all 12 greenways.
Yeah, but Waterbeach Greenway was it was split into two. So there was phase 1, which went from Cardyke Road down to essentially the Jane Coston Bridge, and that phase 1. Yeah, sorry, that's phase 1, and then phase 2. There's a northern section from Cardyke Road up through to the new town, and then the southern section, which will be a separate route with an underpass under the A14. I mean, are you looking at? Are you looking at phase 1 and phase 2?
Yeah. So the answer will be yes. So the outline business case for the Waterbeach route will be that particular piece of work by the consultant will be started once the kind of the technical concept design has finished, and that design is frozen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
okay. So I suppose I've just got one last question then. I mean, do you need to go back to the GCP board to have phase 2 approved?
I understood all the routes have been approved, but
yeah, no, it is only phase 1 for the Waterbeach Greenway that's been approved, not phase 2. So I think my question to you is, please could you have a look at this and have a look at whether phase 2 needs to go back to the GCP board for approval?
Yeah.
So can I just, I'll just help and come in. So I'm Thomas Fitzpatrick, I'm the Transport Programme Manager at GCP. So Councillor Bearpark, you're correct in that phase 2 in terms of funding, there wasn't funding released for the underpass and that kind of part of the Waterbeach Greenway in that decision that was previously taken. So yes, you're right, we would need to go back. In terms of kind of the work that we're doing at the moment, the kind of business case work that we're considering is taking into account all of the Waterbeach Greenway. But I think that one of the key points is that we are looking at what parts of it can be accelerated in terms of delivery. So although we have to go through business case stages, and obviously we are looking for opportunities to advance, parts of the work. And that, goes back to kind of the point you're making about different parts of the Waterbeach Greenway are actually maybe slightly simpler to deliver than others, for example, the underpass. And therefore, what we are looking to do, and that's why we've engaged Milestone in early contractor involvement, is we are looking to basically look for opportunities to advance certain elements of schemes where we can.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I think what I'll do is I'll follow up with more detailed questions, and I'll send those to David.
Yeah, that's completely fine, Councillor Bearpark, and we'll get answers to you if you send them to me, and I'll make sure that the team can get them and get full answers. Would we mind moving on now, please, Councillor, because we've got a number of people. Excellent. So the next person I've got is Robert Illingworth. I'm just going to unmute you, Robert. Okay.
Hello. Yes, I don't know why you've got me. I haven't raised my hand or posed a question. So
all right, I had your hand up, but if you have not got a question,
sorry.
Okay, Sue Rogers, unmute.
Yeah, hi. I put a couple of questions in the chat again. I live in Swayze, and Swayze Brideway, so obviously the Greenways very, very important to me and my friends and that. Fen Drayton, you say you're looking at a Fen Drayton link, but Fen Drayton already has a direct link to the busway, which is Holywell Ferry Road, which is a public byway status. Part of it is concrete and part of it is sand and gravel, which is very bumpy with huge potholes. So it's a very wide track. And it's very direct. It goes up to the RSPB main car park directly from the 3 Tons pub, the lovely pub in Fen Drayton. And the other you raised over as a link. I'm not going to go into detail because there's landowner sensitivities here, but are you aware of the findings of the meeting that I had with Grant Weller and one of his colleagues sometime late last year? Where we were discussing what at the time, I say you, I don't mean you personally, you as a group,
as an organisation,
as an organisation, what you was thinking of for the overlink, and further in after Grant and I and Grant's colleague and friend of mine had met and discussed it further, we came up with a much potentially better location for the route pending landowner negotiations. Basically, because the original route, without going into too much detail, does not connect a village to another village. It's outside of both villages. So
So Atkins have looked at a number of options, or they initially had a number of long list of options for connecting to over, and they've whittled it down slightly, and it feels like they have taken into account those discussions.
Okay, good.
I think it's partly to minimise the number of landowners that sort of the land passes through. So I think what we'll do, we're planning to have NMU workshops with sort of in the near future to talk about all the other Greenway schemes, and this will be one of them. So that will be a chance for you to sort of see the kind of the latest thinking on over. The Fen Drayton link, you're correct. There is an existing link there already. The proposal is to basically improve it to make it kind of sort of up to kind of LTN 120 standards, so that walkers and cyclists can use those routes comfortably. So again, there'll be a chance to sort of we'll table the designs in the near future on those, so you can comment on those.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sue. So the next person I see is Judith, Councillor Rippeth. I'm just going to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hear you, Judith.
Okay, I have put a question in the chat.
Yeah.
It really is becoming, I don't know, almost laughable. We've been at this stage for such a long time, and yet we still don't really know when work is going to start on the Waterbeach Greenway. And I'm just feeling quite impatient for it. And I would like to know from what you've said, possibly that you might start on phase 1 in about a year's time. It's just there's never any dates. It's always another kind of consultation. And it really is a very popular route. I think it would be huge. Lots of people voted for it and took part in the consultation. And yet we're still waiting for any action. And I just really want to get something a bit more firm and concrete from you.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Okay. No. Thank you for the comment. I think all I can say is, we are at advanced stage of the concept design, and then we'll have some engagement with groups, and then we can sort of progress onto the preliminary design stages. And as Thomas said earlier, there might be certain sections of the route that we can accelerate for delivery earlier. I appreciate there's some complicated sections. Part of the alignment parallels the railway network, so obviously there's potential complications there, but I think certainly if there's certain sections maybe at the city end that could be accelerated further, then I think would jump at the chance to basically get those elements delivered.
Chris, can I just...
The land is county farms as well, so probably easier than some other greenways you might be trying to deliver.
Yeah, and there's the Sports Lake Trust, who I had a meeting with last week as well. So yes.
Chris, just to add for the benefit of everyone, really, we have committed to coming back to the executive board in October with a delivery plan, which will firm up dates quite a lot more. I think, you know, there is a lot more work kind of happening right now, and there are significant, you know, amounts of surveys and such like going on, so that we have a really good understanding of what's required. And I appreciate that's not a spade in the ground, but there really is significant progress happening across the board. And as I said, we have committed to coming back with a delivery plan to the executive board in October.
Okay, so it'd be good to just see things starting to happen, having had 2 years of, or even 3 years of not much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the next person I've got a hand up is Ian Allen. I'm just going to Ian, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Ian.
Yeah, cool. I'd just like to ask, I think I saw the plans some time ago and voted on various options for the Waterbeach Greenway, which is very interesting because I cycle out to Waterbeach for work from East Cambridge most days. And I can't remember, if you can remind me, is it the main proposal to use brand new separate routes, or is it widening of the Horningsea Road with cycle paths on either side?
Yeah, I think the alignment as shown in the public consultation is sort of connecting sort of the north end of Cambridge through parallel with the railway line. So it's largely going to be, well, that kind of section will be substantially new. Mm-hmm. So actually the answer is probably both. It's partly on existing kind of highway at the sort of the I guess either end, if you like, and then most of the middle bit is kind of through is new.
So just to add to that, because I think in what you're referring to is also the Horningsea Greenway, which runs along Horningsea Road. So Horningsea Road will have, you know, that forms part of the Horningsea Greenway, where we are looking to kind of widen the existing provision, and that was, you know, part of what was consulted on. And Chris is absolutely right. The Waterbeach Greenway is a separate route, which is predominantly kind of off the existing highway.
All right, so good. Good. Yeah, I'd probably use both actually, depending. You know, sometimes I go straight into the centre of Cambridge, but other times go home to East Cambridge. So I definitely use both lots. So that's good. Good to know. Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Ian. Right, I don't see any more hands up. Chris, I'm just going to start. Oh, right, John Grant's just put his hand up, so I'll just unmute. John, we should be able to hear you now.
Yeah, can I just sort of ask a bit more about the Waterbeach one, the northern part of phase 2, which is carrying on alongside the railway up to the new town. How far ahead are you with sort of thinking about that? Because where it comes out of the Station Road, you'll need to be on Network Rail land. And then between Station Road and Burgess Road is actually quite interesting. And if that bit is particularly difficult, will you just go as far as Station Road, because that will connect the eastern half of the village rather better?
Okay, thanks, John.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's something we're Atkins, our designers are kind of looking at. So yes, we'll take that comment on board.
Okay. But you are actively looking at that option as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to then I'm going to go through the chat now, Chris, and just read out. If there's that's the same, I'll try and summarise. Some people have asked their questions verbally, which is good. First question here from Hazel Smith: who should we, Parish Council, contact with information about change of land ownership in the areas you are looking at?
That's again, that's a good question. So what for each of the routes, our designers will be developing a sort of a planning consent strategy for each route. So I think on a route by route basis, that's one of the issues that will be looked at. But in terms of who to go to, I suppose I could be your first point of contact, and then I could sort of then sorry.
No.
I can be I can be an initial point of contact if that's helpful.
Well, fine. Okay, Judith. So what you're saying to Hazel, if you just email us at contact us at the email address at the end, as Hazel, I can put you in contact with Chris, and we can facilitate that. But also, Chris, the right thing is when you start to do the engagement later on in the year, you'll be reaching out to parish councils quite shortly to make contact with them about the various strategies you've outlined.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, autumn, winter this year we'll be doing that work for Waterbeach and St Ives.
That's good. So just another question is, we always get is what actually is a greenway, and will the surface be tarmac?
What is a greenway? So a greenway is it's an active travel link, so non-motorized users. So I think predominantly routes that walkers and cyclists can use, and also where we've got kind of existing bridle ways, or there's opportunities to connect existing bridle ways, but will also be for equestrian users. So and the answer about a question about tarmac, the answer is maybe. I think the answer is maybe because it will depend largely on which part of the greenway it's in. So if it's in perhaps like the city centre end, then the answer may be yes. But if I think we've got to do more work looking at what we do in kind of rural sections, because I think we need to be we don't necessarily want to tarmac over nice sort of area. So yeah, so I think the answer might be partly to that one.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, it just says there's an error on the map in the first slide. The village of Willingham is missing, and it has a link to the busway. The map actually just shows the greenways. There are other cycling infrastructure that we aren't dealing with as part of the greenway. So just the green map on the first page was just kind of trying to show the scope and scale of the Greenways project that is being funded, but doesn't show all cycling provision within the area. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything is not on any plans, if it's not on the Greenways plan, or maybe it's not in county plans to improve, I think we're keen to listen to other potential opportunities, subject to funding, of course. But yeah, there's.
Okay, so next question is, are the GCP taking on view the current risks and mitigations for non-motorised users on the existing St Ives Greenway, bearing in mind the response to the fatal accident on the Trumpington section of the cycleway that was next to the guided busway? So
yeah, I think lessons learned are really important, but in terms of like a design process, at the end of each design stage there'll be a road safety audit undertaken, which will kind of highlight any particular issues that the design needs to amend because of potential road safety concerns. So so the RSA stage 1 will be the first sort of batch of road safety audits undertaken as part at the end of concept design stage.
Okay, thank you. Next question is will you be using compulsory purchase powers to get the routes that you want?
I think I think that each route's planning and consent strategy will kind of identify that. I think Thomas may sort of want to add to this, but I think that would almost be a last resort. I think we'd want to sort of successfully negotiate with landowners first to see if we've got other potential options before we go down that route.
Yeah, just to add to what Chris just said there, I mean, we have the ability to use compulsory purchase order powers, and where programs become very So in effect, what we don't want to do is go down a route where we haven't served a compulsory purchase order and reach a position where a landowner suddenly changes their mind, because at that point you have to start a compulsory purchase order, and they can take, you know, a year and a half plus to go through a system. So we are considering whether or not to use them sooner rather than later. But clearly our ambition is always to negotiate with landowners, and they would only be used really for certainty of programme rather than anything else. But we have already got kind of the okay from the executive board to use it where required. So that's something that we are working actively to consider with land agents at the moment. But clearly we'll be, you know, our ideal is to work with landowners first. Okay,
thanks very much. Next question is can the GCP consider a links from Waterbeach to Cottenham and Wick and Fen? I think what we are doing is that we are focusing the efforts on the 12 greenways that we've been commissioned and have and sections have identified funding to deliver. We do recognise that this doesn't cover all the requirements in terms of cycling provision in Cambridge and South Cambs. There's always more that could be done in the future. We're working with county colleagues through the LC WIP programme, which is they have the strategic lead in terms of long-term cycling provision. So we do get lots of questions is, can the greenways be extended to this village or that village? In terms of what we're delivering what was set out in terms of the programme, but it doesn't mean that future extensions are off the table, but that's something that the county cycling team would have to consider. I think that's a fair summary, isn't it, Thomas Fitzpatrick? You're nodding furiously.
Yes, yeah.
Let's just move down. I think I think there's the rest of them are just discussion about things. I think that's where we are. I don't think there are any more questions. There's just a statement here, which is the greenways are currently required Cambridge City Centre are providing spokes, but we need ribbons as well as police. Yes, I think that's a good analogy. The greenways are specifically designed to help get active travellers in from the outlying villages into central Cambridge, but as you say, there are a lot more opportunities for connecting up once we've got these in, but it's a large programme and we have to focus on delivering that. I see there's some various comments and opinions and stuff, but I don't see any more questions on this. Barry, I think you've got your hand up, so I'm going to allow you to talk, and then we'll take this as the last question before we move on to the next things. Okay. Are you taking your hand down, Barry? Is that because you don't want to say anything anymore? Okay, on that moment, I think we're going to move on to the next. Thanks very much, Chris. And we're going to move on to the next slide, please.
Thank you.
The next topic, which is a short update on the Histon Road project, which we then go back to Paul van der Bolk.
Oh, thanks, David. So yeah, just one slide on this, just a quick summary, because the construction project is all but finished, although it's not quite finished yet. We still have to do the final road safety audit, and to do that we need the final as-built package from the consultant, which is promised in the next couple of weeks. So as soon as that's with me, I can commission that road safety audit. We had a few things to repair, so the signals at Victoria Road have now been repaired in terms of the detector. One thing about those signals is that we are getting a few complaints about some of the phasings at the junction. So this is the junction with Victoria, Huntingdon, Histon Road. So the issues with the junction were not really to do with the damage detector. They're more to do with kind of a change in vehicles, the numbers of vehicles arriving at the junction, and the change in the pattern of that. And that we think, or the signals experts think, that that's partly to do with the fact that the A14 has been completed since the junction was designed. So there's a different pattern of traffic coming down Huntingdon Road. And also we've got things like the closure of Stories Way, which means that more traffic has to kind of get down to the end of perhaps down Mount Pleasant to access between Huntingdon Road and Madingley Road. So things like that mean that the pattern of traffic has changed at that junction. So we're going to commission a study, well, a short study, and which will eventually lead to a slight remodeling and rephasing of the junction, hopefully, so it fits the current patterns better. And then just one other thing, so we've got some 20-mile-an-hour signage from Victoria Road to Wakeman Street to be installed in the next couple of months, following the traffic regulation order that was recently published, recently consulted on and published. That's it for Histon Road, David.
Okay, thanks very much. So let's move on to Milton Road. Thomas Porter, I think, Thomas, you're going to do this presentation, aren't you?
That's correct. Can you hear me okay, David?
I can hear you loud and clear, Thomas.
Good. So first of all, yeah, I just want to say that David introduced me at the start of the evening. I'm fairly new to the project, come in 2 months ago, and I'll be leading it forward into the construction phase of the project. Okay, so first slide I've got here is just a general progress update. So obviously appreciate we met at the LLF about a month ago, also been through the Joint Assembly and Executive Board recently where there have been a number of questions. So in terms of updates, probably limited as we've had recent meetings and correspondence. But I suppose the big item, the big bullet point at the top is that we recently went through the GCP Executive Board on 17th of March, and the scheme was granted permission to go into the construction phase. Some other points that we've been working on over the past couple of months. So some minor design changes were discussed at the LLF a month ago. These have been worked on by our consultants, WSP, and are being incorporated into the design at the moment. So a construction issue package is due to us on Friday this week, which will be good. Then we can move forward with the final pricing. So the updated general arrangement plans, which are the construction issues, something's happened to the slide. Right, great. I think we're back to the correct slide. So yeah, the updated drawings, construction issue drawings will go onto our website once they're agreed, and the landscaping plans will also be uploaded. We've had a lot of engagement with utility companies. So Milton Road has a lot of utility providers. Their apparatus is in the road and in the verges, footpaths, etc. Over the past couple of months, we've been heavily engaging with the utility companies to try and get to a C4 diversion cost estimate, which then means we can book in diversion works that we need to do throughout the construction phase. We've now finally received the final stage 2 road safety audit, and we're working through the issues and comments that's been addressed as part of that audit. Some items have been rectified or resolved as part of the updates to the design amendments in the construction issue package. Next slide, please.
Thomas, I've just got a question here, which is what is a C4?
Okay, yeah, I was a bit hesitant whether to write that into the slide, and obviously I should have explained a bit more. So it's part of the process with utility companies. So it goes through from a C1 to a C9 stage. A C4 is basically a detailed cost estimate provided by the utility company. And then when we go into construction and we have utility providers on site, it then goes into, say, C5, C6, and then the final completion where you agree the final account with utility providers is at the C9 stage. So it's really just a process used with utility companies. Okay, moving on to this slide. So there's been some recent discussion around pedestrian cycling arrangements during the construction period. So I've tried to address this a little bit in this slide, and there's another couple of slides after this one that just gives some marked up drawings, which might help more than the text on that you can see. But yeah, I guess the general principle is we're trying to maintain two-way motorised traffic flow along the length of Milton Road throughout the construction period. Milton Road is wider than Histon Road, so it is possible to do that, albeit it's fairly tight, but it should help throughout the construction period. There is more than likely that we will need some signalised traffic management at some stages during the project. It's difficult to say at the moment exactly when, but certainly when we need to do some of the utility diversions, it's likely that we will need some signalised traffic management. However, yeah, all modes of transport will be accommodated throughout the construction works, and which I'll go into in the next slides in a bit more detail, but Milestone are not planning on working throughout the whole of the length of Milton Road at one time, if that makes sense. So they're planning on working in certain sections. So where they're not working, then there's more space within the current corridor to accommodate, say, cyclists off the carriageway, etc. Hopefully, the next slides will make that a bit clearer. And yeah, next one. So they're going to ensure cyclists will be accommodated in their own traffic lane as far as practical. Again, this is tricky, and I'll explain a bit more in the next slide. And then, yeah, once obviously when Milestone have completed one side or that section of works, then the new facilities can be opened up essentially for pedestrian and cyclists. Next slide, please. So yeah, appreciate this. This is quite detailed, and there's a lot of information on here, but this can be found within the Milestones construction phase plan, which I think is a public document now. So if you want this to look at this in more detail, you are able to get to it. So what Milestone have done is they've essentially broken down the job into 3 phases. This slide shows pedestrian arrangements. So really, if you look at phase 1 here, the orange areas are, say, the planned works areas at that time. So pedestrians can use the opposite side of the road. There's currently so footpath on either side of the road. Pedestrians can use the side that Milestone are not working. If they are coming down the footpath where Milestone are working, that footpath will be closed at the point where Milestone are working. So there will be crossing arrangements for pedestrians to cross the road and then join the footpath on the other side of the road. And then fairly straightforward as you go through the works packages, the works phases you can see on this drawing. Then, as I say, when the new facilities are constructed, that pedestrian path will become available, and the same principle continues that pedestrians will need to cross the road where Milestone are working and walk on the other side of the road for that section. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the cycling arrangements through the construction period. Same principle in terms of splitting the scheme into 3 phases, and same principle with the works phases highlighted in orange. So what this slide is trying to show is both outbound and inbound cycling arrangements. So it's a bit more tricky, but for phase 1, for example, outbound cyclists can use the arrangements as they currently do. Inbound, there'll be 2 options. So when they come to an area where Milestone have closed that section to do the works, cyclists can either use shared footway cycle path if that's available, or they would need to cycle in the carriageway past that section of works. Once they get past that section of works, there is opportunity to use the closed lane where Milestone are not working, and they'll be able to use that area where vehicle traffic will not be able to get to. It's also important to note that there'll be a 20-mile/hour speed limit throughout the construction phase. So I think that's all I want to say on that slide. So next slide, please.
Thomas, I just want to add to that is we recognise those slides are very detailed, and we are working on clearer maps that we will put on the website ahead of the work starting. So both for the pedestrians and cyclists, we're working on sort of more user-friendly, less technical drawings, and we just haven't got them ready in time for tonight, but that's something we're working on. I think it's sort of a visualization, isn't it, on how it will look through construction phase. Okay. So site compounds, I think this is another area which has raised some queries recently. So really what I want to say is Woodhead Drive still remains our preferred option for locating a site compound. There are some big advantages to do this for us. It's centrally located, which allows us obviously to access the entire length of the scheme. There's also limited number of other options. We are planning on keeping this open for pedestrians and cyclists, but it will be closed from Hopkins Close to Milton Road for vehicle traffic. We are planning on connecting this to mains electric, so rather than generator, which will help to mitigate any noise in that area. We are looking at the Cowley Road City Council depot. I've made inquiries with them there, and I think at the moment it is being used until mid-April. So we cannot get a definite answer until then whether that is going to be a viable option for us to use. But I think with that depot being so far to the north of the scheme, it isn't really feasible to have our complete office set up in that location and be servicing, say, the southern end of the scheme from that area, which is why Woodhead Drive still remains the preferred option. But we would still like to use the council depot area as well as a secondary sort of additional storage area, and that would certainly help with feeding the northern part of the scheme with materials. And lastly, the last bullet point here is just that we're looking at some office facilities as well at the southern end of the scheme. So Milestone is still looking into that to see whether that's going to work for us. Next slide, please. So yeah, this just really gives a bit of a visualization. Don't worry too much about the text in this, but really it's just to give you a visualization of Woodhead Drive and how that might look. So the grey cabins and the green cabins are a mixture of welfare facilities and site offices, and then the sort of the pinky area is a material storage area. So it really just gives an indication of what Milestone are planning to have set up. Next slide, please. So onto loading and unloading. This was brought up at the LLF, so there may be a little bit of repetition here, but I think it's worth discussing it a bit more today. So the current drawings have double yellow lines throughout, so that is the current design. There is some possibility we could have a location-based loading ban if we felt that was the best way forward, or there is an option of having a loading ban along the entire length of Milton Road, which is potentially more of an extreme option, but that is a possibility. If you go into the next slide, please, it gives a bit more detail, and I'll go into each of those a bit more detail. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, it's the double yellows. So these essentially allow loading and unloading, but prohibit waiting and parking. So it does give that flexibility of having loading and unloading throughout the scheme, but then that could be seen as being a problem rather than flexibility, I suppose. Location-based loading ban could help in certain areas, but I suppose the concern or risk with this is that it just displaces the parking or the loading and unloading to
to other areas, which may not be an ideal scenario. And thirdly, a location ban, a loading ban along the entire length of the scheme could be deemed a good option, but this would also have impact on the residents along Milton Road in terms of any form of loading and unloading outside their property. So I think as GCP, we are open to residents or people's viewpoint on this, and we can stick to our current design, which is the double yellows, or we can go further in terms of loading ban, and we're open to people's views and opinion on that. Next slide, please. So residents parking, as was mentioned earlier, there was a meeting on Monday evening around residents parking. So residents parking is really a bigger thing than just Milton Road, really, but it's been put in here, I suppose, as Milton Road scheme does displace some of the parking along there, and that is creating a problem, I suppose, an issue. So residents parking is being prioritised. It's something that we're actively working on now, and I don't really want to supersede discussions from Monday, but essentially consultations will be being carried out on residents parking, and solution will be looked into and the options looked into. Next slide, please. So moving on to the next steps with the project. So as I say, yeah, we're expecting the construction issue design package on Friday this week. Once we get that, Milestone can then finalise their pricing and programme, and then this will be issued to us for review. We're expecting that in around 3 weeks' time, so mid-April. We will need some time to review this, comment, and come to some agreement with Milestone. So we're looking at potentially placing an order with them late April. The Milestone will need a period of mobilisation, approximately 4 weeks, which brings us to sort of end of May, early June to commence construction on site. Next slide, please. So yeah, I've just put a bit here about communication. So really, these are some of the key items before we start on site. So we're planning on doing a letter drop to sort of residents in a wider area, sort of around Milton Road, quite a large area, and this will give the exact commencement date, exact date we're going to start. We'll be putting up some static or mobile VMSs, which will give some indication for people passing them.
So Thomas, VMSs are
like mobile messaging boards, essentially.
There are the big sort of LED things. Which,
that's correct.
We can use the ones that are fixed around Cambridge, but we can also put some temporary ones up. Is that what you're saying?
That's completely correct. Yeah. So there are some that are permanently around Cambridge, which we can use, and then we have some that are mobile that we can bring out and place them in specific locations that we want to where we feel are the best location. We're planning on doing a second letter drop as well. This is just specific for residents where we need to carry out any works that are adjacent to their boundaries. So there's some vegetation clearance that we will need to do that is where it's overgrown into the highway that we will need to cut back to the boundary. And there will be some driveway modifications at some point to do. There are some driveways which go over into the highway, which will need to be modified back to the highway boundaries. So that'll be a specific letter drop to those residents. They're the key things, but obviously the communication side of things will be a much bigger item throughout construction. So Milestone will be looking to bring in their CLO fairly soon, the customer liaison officer, and that person will be up and running to support and to provide initial engagement for any issues throughout the construction phase. Obviously, we have our website. There's communications in with GCP. We're planning on doing monthly letter drops, and then any other specific items and meetings throughout the construction phase. So we are open to people's views and queries throughout the construction phase, and we will help to answer all those queries.
So I would just add to that as well, we would also be using social media, so across Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you know, it's quite a good way of keeping up to date with the project, and we'll on top of everything else that Thomas has outlined, we'll be also using the sort of social media channels which we found were very effective when we were building on Histon Road, working on this road.
Okay. Next slide. I don't know if is that my last slide or is another one? I think that's it.
Okay. So I have just got, I don't see anyone's hands up. A question from Councillor Rippeth. Are you expecting to complete the Milton Road project by the spring of 2023? So
short answer is no. We're looking at a 2-year program, so it's more like 2024.
Yeah. So it's at least a 2-year program, mobilisation in the spring of this year. So it'll be a 2-year program through to the sort of spring, summer of 2024. Is that what you're saying, Thomas?
Yeah, 2 years from when we start. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's a long. So Judith just asked, so longer than Histon Road, and say yes, it's going to take longer than Histon Road to do. Is that because it's a bigger project, or?
My understanding is it is a longer scheme. Yeah, it's a bigger scheme. Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head how long Histon Road took, but yeah, it is a larger scheme.
Yeah. Okay. No one else has their hand. I mean, I know we've had quite a lot of engagement. We've been meeting earlier this week, and a meeting was the other left. So I think. So a question here just says, when will the trees on Milton Road be chopped down?
Yeah. So that I assume that's the existing trees that are being removed as part of the scheme. So yeah, we'll be looking at carrying that out fairly early on, but Milestone will be programming that in as part of their detailed program that they'll send us when they update the cost as well. So we'll receive more detail when we receive that program.
Okay, but in terms of tree, if we are losing some trees on Milton Road, I understand there's a net gain in terms of number of trees. Yeah.
There's a big net gain. So we're planting around 200 trees, and I think we're removing less than 100.
Yeah,
that sort of numbers. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. Okay, Robert Illingworth's got his hand up, so I'm going to allow him to talk. Okay, I pressed the button. Robert, we can't hear you at the moment. Oh, there we have.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yes. Apparently, I have to unmute as well.
Yes, you do.
Realise that. Okay. Now you're closing off Woodhead Drive, this junction with Milton Road. So that means cars from Woodhead Drive Estate is going to have to come out onto Milton Road via Downham's Lane. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's the route they would need to take. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the sight lines for cars exiting Downham's Lane are pretty poor, as are the sight lines for cyclists coming up the existing cycle track on Milton Road. So, have you got any proposals to mitigate any potential dangers that might occur at that junction?
I think at the moment Milestone will need to monitor that, and we will need to look at that exit from that junction. I'm not aware at the moment of Milestone discussing that in detail, but it is something. If there's an issue there, we will need to look at that and look at how we can improve that during the construction phase. Milestone, they will work with us and with the residents. So if there are some issues as we go through the construction phase, we will look to resolve that in the best way that we can.
Yeah, certainly, Thomas. So, hi everyone, my name is Ko Horahayat from Milestone. So as Thomas emphasised, we take away any concerns that are fed back to ourselves. Specifically at this point, we'll take that away and have a look at that as well, whether there's anything that can be done in terms of the sight lines. Some of it might involve looking at ways of ensuring that vehicles can't park perhaps on the corners. That'll actually sort of obstruct the lines. So yeah, certainly we'll be flexible in terms of our approach just to make sure it does work properly.
Well, the sight lines are poor because it's a narrow exit. There's no fanning of the hedges of gardens that are on the two corners, or very little fanning at that point. So and then there are tall hedges. So the sight lines are really very poor.
So we can,
if a lot of traffic's going to start, well, a lot of traffic will start using it because there's quite a lot of houses in Woodhead Drive area.
Mm-hmm. So we can look at if there's any vegetation clearance that we can do to assist that. I'm not sure off the top of my head if there's much overgrown vegetation down there, and if that would help. But certainly, yeah, that can be looked into and see if we can mitigate any issues.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Thomas. Right. I've got a question here from Rachel Drysdale regarding loading, unloading. If that were to be prohibited all the way along, that would create problems for Cambridge Day Nursery in the absence of any handy parking possibilities. And there are no parking places given the residents parking on Ayrsham Road, George Street and Herbert Street. So I think it was just a point that if you went for that option of unloading, that would cause Cambridge Day Nursery a problem, Thomas.
I think a loading ban along the entire length of Milton Road is potentially going a step too far with it.
Okay.
So I think we need to look into a bit more detail around the location-based loading and unloading loading ban, and what the sort of the mitigating options would be for that in terms of having suitable areas for loading and unloading. So I think that needs to be looked into in a bit more detail. But yeah, any views that locals have will be appreciated, I suppose.
Well, Rachel is agreeing with. She says she agrees it would be a step too far. So
yeah,
we'll take that feedback on board.
David, one thing to say on that though is that if you were to have a loading ban along the length of Milton Road, then you would set out certain areas where it was possible to load and unload within certain time limits. So that's one way of potentially mitigating those kind of issues. So if there's a particular time outside a certain premises where loading and unloading is required, then you would allow it at those times. It's all part of the equation and part of what needs to be looked at.
That's fine. Paul, just while you're on, I've got no more questions on Milton Road, but there's a question here about Histon Road, which we can cover off, which is, says, have you had any feedback from Histon Road residents on how they feel about the completed scheme? And out of curiosity, how many of you, David, Thomas, Chris, Paul, cycled your main mode of transport or have much experience in cycling around Cambridge? Well, I can answer the second part of that, which I've lived in Cambridge most of my life, Karen. I live in Histon now, and cycling is my main mode of transport around Cambridge. I regularly use Histon Road and have done for a long time. I think, and I really like the scheme. I think it's a step change for cyclists, and so that's my point of view. And I know other people will have to speak for themselves in terms of how much they cycle. I know Paul does. So But Paul, do you have any feedback from Histon Road residents at the moment? I don't want to open up a massive conversation about Histon Road, but can you just answer that one question, please?
This is the feedback I get via you, David. So a lot of the I mean, there's been mixed feedback. Most of the feedback I've had has been positive. And yes, I've both drive and regularly cycle on Histon Road. I've cycled up and down Histon Road to work on a daily basis for many years, and I can say that for cycling, I think it was a massive improvement. There's a couple of areas maybe I would have done differently, if I'm honest, slightly differently, but in general, as an overall scheme, I think it's achieved what it was set out to do. So generally, the feedback has been positive. I mentioned an issue about the junction earlier, and it's something that's typical on a complex junction that we will need to look into to kind of get that junction running as well as possible. Obviously, there's a bit of snagging to do because as the road is built, there's, you know, I've noticed as I cycled up and down today, actually, a couple of drain covers that have sunk, and that will all need to be picked up in the next couple of months when we walk up and down the scheme with Milestone again to pick up any snagging issues.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. I don't actually see any more questions. No one else has got their hands up, and no one else has put a question in the chat. So I think, as I say, there's been quite a number of meetings on this, Thomas, hasn't there? So I'm sure that's given up. The email address on the screen now is the best way. That is that is checked on a daily basis. That's the best way to get a question about any of our projects in terms of how we deliver it to how we deliver if you email us in on that, we will make sure it gets to the right program manager so we can answer your question. Right. So I think on that basis that we have had all the questions. I'm going to call the meeting over. If you have a question, again, I'm sure one or two questions will occur to people at the moment. The meeting's fair. Please do email us. But then I just want to thank our presenters, Paul, Thomas, and Chris, and Thomas Fitzpatrick, who joined in today for your presentations. And we will close the meeting then. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Cheers, David.
Cheers, thanks.
Are we just staying for a second, David?
Yeah.